Okay, just wanted to make a video explaining what Direct Action Training is. Direct Action Training is a company that I own that provides training to CCW civilians, law enforcement, military personnel, and we work all kinds of training. I mean, firearms, tactics, edge tools, impact tools, improvised weapons, hand-to-hand combat. We work everything. It's the kind of training that is absolutely needed, especially today with the kind of threats that we face. It's very much geared towards that street application, that down and dirty, let's get you home alive when shit hits the fan and gets real. I don't tie it into any one particular style, right? Like people always look for a certain style. They're like, oh, what if I do Krav? What if I do Kali? What if I do boxing? What I teach, I say do whatever works. You know, I've learned a lot of styles over the years. I've done a lot of training over the years. I know what is proven, what is not proven, and I'm all about doing what you need to do to stay alive and get out of that situation. So I don't like to tie anything down to one art. I don't believe any one art has it figured out. If that was the case, we would all only ever be doing the one art and nobody would do anything else. So you have to blend them, you have to mix them, you have to do what works. You have to have the emotional side of training, the psychological side of training. The weapons have to be involved. The multiple attackers have to be addressed. Just the straight up brutality of war and combat has to be there, and that has to be taken into account. So the training needs to strike that emotional section. It needs to attack that psychological section. It can't just be physical techniques that are thrown at you. It's got to go way past that, and that's what I do. You know, we do a lot of role playing, a lot of UTM training, which is like a simunition. It's an artificial round with the firearm, and throw you in situations where you're forced to react when things get very real. So you have someone yelling at you, cursing at you, screaming, getting that emotional and that psychological portion there, so it feels very real, and then boom, we're going to see what you do. Then we're going to fix what you did, right, and address the things you did right, fix some of the things you did wrong, and actually work you through that process to where combat, which is so chaotic and it's just absolute chaos, now becomes a controlled chaos. So it's not this just chaos, it's controlled. So you're making calculated decisions and staying task driven through that process in order to accomplish whatever goal it is you're trying to accomplish. So now chaos is not looked at the same, it's controlled. Kind of like risk. Risk is always going to be there, but you could take reckless risk or you could take very calculated and controlled risk, right? Well, combat's the same thing. It's all chaos. I can't take away the chaos portion, but I can make it a controlled chaos that you're able to work through and stay task driven every step of the way to accomplish whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. My training's for everybody too. A lot of people are, oh, who's this training for? It's for everybody. CCW civilians, law enforcement, military personnel. I've trained all of them. And the thing about that is I train them all slightly different. You know, military have to follow certain rules of engagement and conduct their self in a certain way. So I train them very different than I would train my law enforcement guy. They can't be trained the same. Law enforcement is a very different type of job, very different type of role. Most of the people that I train fall under the law enforcement umbrella. A lot of the people that I train are either SWAT personnel or defensive tactics instructors for their department, and then I also just train, officers on patrol. But I understand their job. I understand what they go through and the kind of training that they need. I also understand FDLE standards and what they're taught, and what works and what doesn't, and then what they can actually do while still being able to execute their job, but also keep their job, be safe and keep the department from, liability and lawsuits and things of this nature. So working with law enforcement is a very different type of training. That's not something every instructor could do. You really have to understand their job, their, procedures and protocols and what they can and cannot do, and still have them be able to do that job to get home safe to their family, but also be able to keep their job and not have the department tied up in lawsuits and all sorts of legal issues. Then CCW civilians, those are the people that I have a big spot for, because they're truly the first responders. They will be there on scene before law enforcement. It's going to take law enforcement a good amount of time to get there. If a CCW is there with the training and the gun on them, they can make a huge difference. So the CCW civilian is your true first responder, and I train a lot of CCW civilians, and it's amazing how that market doesn't really get addressed. You know, a lot of people just want to focus on their military and their law enforcement and that kind of stuff, but nobody thinks about the CCW civilian. And it leaves the CCW guy walking around with, you know, just a few trips to the range and a gun that he bought like 10 years ago, and he feels that he could just deal with whatever situation comes up because he does good at the range. Like, no, that has nothing to do with working that gun in an urban dynamic situation. That's a very specific type of training that you're not going to get at a range. You're going to need to go to like tactical academies to learn that stuff, and even then some of those tactical academies don't really touch on the stuff that needs to be touched on for running a firearm in everyday life. I mean, we have to focus on everything: weapon retention, working that gun confined space, multiple attackers, not just the actual shooting part, but the weapon manipulation. What happens if it goes empty? How fast can you get that reload in? What if it malfunctions? If you had to use it as an impact weapon to create the space that you need to get those shots off. I mean, there's a lot that goes into the firearm training, running it in a CCW fashion realistically for what is involved in an urban setting. So that's the kind of training that I do. And so again, my training is covering everything: impact, edge, projectile, all those different tools, also the hand-to-hand stuff, ground, stand-up, etc., everything. Doing whatever works using proven concepts and principles that have gathered through many years of training. And it's for CCW civilians, law enforcement, other security professionals, executive protection, security detail, people like this, and then also military. And it doesn't matter of the skill level. I train people from all different skill levels. Some of them are very advanced. I mean, everything from my tier 1 operators all the way down to just your average guy who has a CCW permit. I work with all of them, and I cater the training to make sure it matches their needs, what they can actually apply, and then how they can apply it based on their rules of engagement, procedures, protocols, federal law, things like this. And I give them stuff that I know is going to keep them alive, but also keep them safe legally, or with their department, or with their branch of government, which has to be taken into consideration. I can't just give these guys all the stuff that you see in these Hollywood movies, because that's Hollywood. One, most of it's crap because they're doing it with a compliant partner, but then two, it's the stuff that looks cool, that doesn't translate to the stuff that you could actually apply on the street to, one, stay alive, two, keep you safe legally after you do what needs to be done to stay alive. So that's just a quick rundown on direct action training and what it is, what I teach, and who I teach. And it is for everybody. So if you're serious about getting training and you want to be a true asset to society and be that first responder, when that time hits, and have the training that you need to get through that situation, I'm here to help. So I'm not a hard guy to find. If you want to contact me about more training options, go ahead, contact me. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, I have all of it. So just go ahead, contact me. We'll set something up. But thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it. I hope this helped explain what direct action training is a little bit more.